Yes, sir. Welcome in. How about, wow, no less than 6 Dallas Cowboys defenders coming in as reinforcements as the second half is fixing to get underway. Scale of 1 to 10. Put your comments down below. How optimistic are you the second half will be better for the Cowboys? It is week 11. We're 5 days away from Cowboys Raiders in the Monday Nighter. Take it away, Jimmy.
The only thing else I got to say is, how about them Cowboys?
Yeah, I'm Gavin Dawson from 105.3 The Fan, and with me, as always, my favorite football Neanderthal, New Bear Lesniewski. How you doing, bro?
I'm burning the shit out of my tongue, and I made soup way too hot because all the kids are taking turns being sick, and then I was like, well, I better eat some too, and I made that shit boil, and I burned the shit out of my tongue. So if I talk funny tonight, that's what I'm blaming it on.
Funnier than usual, maybe even. Smash that like button if you believe the Cowboys can bring more wow factor in the second half of the season, maybe even give you faith they're on the right path. If they don't make the playoff, can we at least feel good about the coaching staff commitment to physicality and this team picking up some wins? I think the defense needs to play better. I was asking the guys on G-Back today, New Bear, if you could restart the season from this point forward with all the guys coming in, Quinnen Williams, Logan Wilson, your safeties are healthy, and you have a better pass rush than the start of the season here with Ezraku and Clowney really coming on
Revel
the weeks. Could this be a top 20 defense? That would be around 24.5 points per game, and I think so. I think this would be a close to average defense if they could restart the season now.
I can't wait to see Overshown running. You know, all these guys and all the different reasons we're going to talk about them tonight in the coming weeks. How much joy does that dude play? I mean, Agent Zero, when we were out in Oxnard and everyone thought he was still kind of like a ways away, and then he came flying out of that end zone after the big play, and we were like, he was like running 20 miles an hour. Like this is going to be great to see.
It's incredible. Like Leighton Vander Esch, 29 years old, Jalen Smith, 30 years old. Like you should have fortified defensive leaders on this team that have just been lost to injury. Trayvon Diggs is a huge example of that. And Overshown might be the biggest one because his heart and his wisdom is massive. You know, he's an East Texas country kid, but like the old soul is just undefeated when it comes to his ability to transcend whoever he's talking to, like his positivity, his professionalism. It is all there. It's all lined up, and you got to keep your fingers crossed that, you know, he's going to shake off the rust. He's going to be amazing, but he's now coming back from 2 catastrophic knee injuries. So that's a big key, you know, and I don't know how much we can expect in the first game back for Overshown, first game in with Logan Wilson. I just hope they don't lose to the Raiders because this is absolute must win. And we joke about what's a must win, what's not. If you lose this game, then your chances of the playoffs are completely gone. And we have to then go through the gauntlet of Philly, Detroit, Kansas City. And on the other side of that, you have some divisional games and a game against the Chargers and the Vikings that might refortify you by the time you get to the end of the season. But if you lose this game, everything is on the table as far as finishing the season with 3 or 4 wins and a top 10 or top 5 pick.
Well, that's what's going to get really interesting because Max Crosby's not going to lay down. You know, Geno Smith, professional quarterback, as up and down as he's been, he can have one of those nights. The question is, who's he going to throw it to? Well, Brock Bowers is a pretty good place to start. And they got that Lambo in the backfield that they're still trying to get on charge. Like, you know, there's dudes, and this isn't one of those things where, you know, earlier in the season when the Steelers were going to Cleveland and I was talking about them and you're trying to talk yourself into, you know, a Dylan Gabriel, a Jerry Jeudy, you know, Njoku. Every team has guys, but not every team has guys at every level that have, you know, been all pro or are all pros in the making, top 5 picks, you know, dudes that have thrown, you know, for 4,000 yards or led the lead in completion percentage. Like there are still guys left on this team. Just because Jacoby Myers, you know, picked his destination down at Jacksonville Beach, like I'm not saying I'm worried about it because quite frankly, this should be one of those not get right games from the perspective of, oh, hey, yeah, we're going to go hang a 40 burger and just embarrass these dudes. But like, let's get all these moving parts together for the first time and really enjoy what that looks like.
You know, I'm glad you brought up the Raiders, and they do have guys, and this collection of guys now, albeit Jacoby Myers played in 6 or 7 of their games so far, and he was their best wide receiver. But the trio of Lockett, Tucker, who's a burner, and Besh, they are averaging the second most yards of separation per route, Broadus told us today in the G-Bag Nation on 105.3 The Fan. And if you don't get pressure on Geno Smith, I think they're going to put up 25 to 30 points, and on the road, your offense is, averaging under 24 points per game. This game could really, be a problem because of that. And then you mentioned Bowers. They love to throw it over the middle of the field. The Cowboys linebackers and safeties have really struggled to stay on the same page and take away those angles, take away those gaps in the defense. So it's a big challenge, when you're looking at Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson, who'll be back at practice tomorrow, and you're looking at Logan Wilson to be a guy that can give you some awareness over the middle of the field and in those zones, take away that massive gap that was just an incredible blind spot behind Kenneth Murray. I mean, you talk about guys with eyes in the back of their head. Kenneth Murray is blindfolded in the back of his head.
Well, and their line has not been good, and Powers Johnson went to IR, right?
So, yeah, it's terrible.
And Powers Johnson is a guy, you talk about pedigrees and you talk about, dudes on run, on respective rises to a play. I think everyone thought, he was going to be a plug and play, Pro Bowl guy, and has just never really fit. And they were moving him around. And I mean, I think either one, whether it's your city or mine, would have been nice to maybe give that dude a fresh start. And now, the season might be over before it ever really had a chance to gain any traction. So this is going to be interesting, right? With Ezraku really coming into his own, with Q joining the mix next to Kenny Clark, Osa and company, professionals on our side, Fowler. And this has to be one of those games where you put your hand in the dirt and you make the other team pay.
Yeah, I mean, so you have 11 guys on defense. I don't know if all of these guys are going to start, but if you add Revel to it, it's 6 of the 11 who will be on the field that weren't. So I think there is a huge opportunity for this defense to be significantly better. The massive gaping hole in the middle of your field provided by Osa against the run. He's a good pass rusher. He's getting a lot of double teams, but against the run, Osa bad. Your linebackers horrible. They were diving at ankles for the majority of the first 9 games. And your safeties couldn't help much at all, especially after Wilson and Hooker went out. I do think this is a significantly different defense. And then you could go to even Kalen Carson, who came back, the second-year corner, who struggled as a rookie, but actually showed signs of promise and has generated some buzz here going into Week 11, that maybe Carson could be, one of those guys who is better than the collection of undrafted dudes you've been trying to throw out there since really since training camp, and then compounded it with Trayvon Diggs out. Like, there have been so many players in this game that would probably fit in better in spring league or CFL action as far as belonging in the NFL. It just did not add up at all with a lot of these guys. Just bad football players, maybe even worse than what the Raiders offensive line is going to be Monday night.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too, because Bland has to really come back. Bland has to really, Marvin Harrison did a number on him and really made his daddy proud, where, heading into that game, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s father, Marvin Harrison Sr., the Hall of Famer, right, was basically publicly saying, I don't like the way this team's using my son. Well, can we trade him somewhere that'll actually throw him the damn ball? And for Deron Bland to become the poster child for him to really, step into his own and even get Marvin Harrison Sr. to put the Twitter down that's a tough week. And now you've gone into the bye and had the tragedy, and, these guys are struggling, emotionally, spiritually. And now you got to go back out there and get right over these next few days, because if you don't, like you said, Tyler Lockett's getting a little bit older. He's lost a step, but those young dudes can really go.
Yeah, and I don't mind tanking, right? I don't mind tanking at all if that's what the Cowboys end up getting mathematically eliminated. What I mind is you looking like one of the worst 5 defenses in the NFL, because we have to believe that everything they've done and the guys they've gotten healthy have put them maybe 2 first-round picks away from getting back to above average defensively next season, maybe even top 10 if Ezraku plays, the way that you think he can, and Revel realizes his potential. If you go out here and give up 35 to the Raiders and then lose 3 in a row to the teams we just mentioned, that's 6 losses in a row. Now you have Minnesota and the Chargers to deal with. I think they're going to beat the Giants and Commanders. Like, right now, I think they're going to finish in these next 8 games. I think they're going to go 4-4, and say, man, it's unfortunate that we played our best ball at the end of the year when our schedule got so tough. If we had been this good at the beginning of the season, maybe we don't lose to Chicago and Carolina and Arizona, and we would actually have been a playoff team if we had just gotten our stuff in order a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just don't see Dak Prescott and company tanking. You don't trade for Logan Wilson and Quinnen Williams and then tank. Like, basically what you're saying is, if they do that, meaning they lose to the Raiders, you go into Philly week and you're just giving up. Like, if you're going to,
no, they wouldn't tank yet. They won't tank till they're mathematically eliminated, and then they'll call it going young. Yeah.
But, okay, so let's say there's 3, 4, 5 weeks left. You have to take Dak Prescott off the field and play Joe Milton. So then you start doing that. Do you have to sit CD and GP and play young guys everywhere? Like, are guys all of a sudden having sciatica? What's up, LeBron? And we go through, the machinations of that, which is just going to get ugly. And I mean, I don't.
To your point, it would probably have to be predetermined. It would have to be preceded by some injuries.
Yeah,
and maybe Dak is at the top of that food chain. But I think there's probably not a lot of old guys on this team that would feel like, man, we got to get these guys some rest, and you'd probably be still trying to build for the rest of it. But I mean, taking wasn't the point I was trying to make. It's just that I don't want to finish a season with 4 or 5 wins and then keep your fingers crossed and hope to the football gods that you can be the team that adds 8 to 10 wins the next season. It's just a lot more unrealistic. You could be competitive in 2026.
Yeah. I mean, and let's not forget that there's all kinds of galvanizing forces, whether that's a coach getting fired, in this case, a treasured member of the family no longer being with us. And this is going to be a hair on fire type of evening, right? It has to be, because Max Crosby, again, is not going to slow down for anyone. And the thing about Geno Smith, and this is not meant to be a joke because he had a teammate get his jaw broke when he was in New York, but if you punch him in the face, he will lay down. Like, these guys, and that comment may not age well if what you're talking about comes to fruition, but when you watch the Raiders, and I almost just called them the Oakland Raiders, talking about going, the autumn wind is a pirate, they're always going to be the Raiders. They're always going to have a trick up their sleeve. Pete Carroll's a hell of a coach. Tom Brady's, sending illegal messages from the announcer's booth and all the other things that people are so worried about, right, with him and all the off-field stuff or all the stuff up in the press box. They're almost like Cowboys light, where there's more attention on what's going on with the guys wearing headsets and guys up in the press box and, what finger they might be raising after a few soda pops than what's been going on the field, because the product on the field has been so bad.
Jerry Jones joined us on The Fan, said Quinnen Williams excited to say the least about being in Dallas, said we were excited to welcome him in. It's a really positive thing. He's really comfortable being in Dallas. That sounds like just an instant perfect fit. On Logan Wilson, he'll fit right in. He understands our system and has played it his entire career. The number one thing is his instincts. Another thing we did not mention about how the defense could be better is going to the 5-man defensive line. I don't know, what kind of expectations you have on that going in, but they played it significantly more in the Arizona game. I think they have just about tripled the amount of times they played 5-man front. It looked like their run defense and their pass rush was a little bit better. I don't want to take Kenny Clark or Osa off the field. I think it's 3 of their best 5 defensive linemen. So let's get our best 5 on the field. And if that's what they pursue, I think that's an added element that could make them, significantly different, maybe make the pieces all add up to be the sum of their parts a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, what's going to be really interesting about, and this is why I wanted them to trade for Micah Fitzpatrick so badly, because when you talk about 5-man front, like base 5-man front, bare 5-man front, and everybody thinks about gearing up to stop the run, what's really cool, and 5-2 becomes 6-1. You remember what Belichick made famous in the Super Bowl, changing that and really messing with the math and giving different looks. But what's really fun about 5-2 is one of the variations off it is called Monster, where different teams call it, whether it's a money, a jack, different schemes, different coaches, different names for essentially the same thing, which is like that special player who's like a hybrid linebacker safety, or even like if it's a smaller guy like Tyrann Mathieu, it could be a nickel safety, guys who can move in and out depending on what you're playing against and what you're trying to design and really what you're trying to hide. And I don't think they have that guy, right? Because Overshown is probably too big, but also he's not going to be healthy yet. Revel, you want him outside. Bland too small. Not a face in the fan type of guy like Matthew was. But like the Micah Fitzpatrick thing, or some of this, like what Kyle Hamilton does in Baltimore, like it can come in all shapes and sizes. What I'm trying to say is that one of the reasons it's in some systems that you call it a jack is because it's a jack of all trades, that Swiss Army knife type guy. And I would have loved to have seen them grab Minka, or even still, thinking about next year when you talk about how far might you have to move up to grab a Caleb Downs, or some of these other guys that are going to potentially come around between the draft and free agency. Because if you're going to keep Kenny Clark, right, and if you're going to do 5-2 type stuff, there's actually a lot of really fun elements that you can bring off of it that involve both linebacker and safety level that are wholly dependent on the dudes that you have to get the job done.
So is the Jack one of the two, or is he one of the two safeties?
The 5-2 monster. It's the monster back is a hybrid linebacker safety. And the reason I talk about Micah so much is because there was a couple years ago when Pittsburgh was having some trouble. One of the years Micah wasn't all pro is because he had like 125 tackles because he was basically playing linebacker. And then toward the end of his time in Pittsburgh, you see him playing Ken Griffey Jr. center field, not as an eraser, but as a safety valve. And everybody remembers him making those 3 All-Pros because he was the Swiss Army knife, where his instincts allow him to play from a center field position and get downhill like Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu. And that's what I mean about it coming in all shapes and sizes. Like, people think about Ed Reed being one type of safety and Polamalu being a completely different type of safety, and they were, but functionally within a scheme, when you have, multifaceted pieces, I think that's what's going to be really interesting to see going forward is, like, are they going to do things in the draft and with free agency where they really kind of want to be static and they stay in this traits, right, where we're talking about length and speed, and it's really about how it looks on the grease board, how it looks on the paper napkin? Or are they going to start getting football players that allow them to dictate and particularly change post snap, right? Because the thing that's so special about guys who can play from 30 yards deep to in your backfield, and the reason they're so rare, the reason that you call Kyle Hamilton a unicorn, is because there just aren't a lot of those dudes. So when you identify them and you find a slot for them to go, shoot their shot inside of what you're going to do around them, and you have the big dudes up front that make it worth that kind of investment, that's really one of the things I'm going to be watching the most closely, both again through the draft and through the whole summer.
Yeah, it's like the Floyd Mayweather gene, where they're just a half second ahead, and it's not only the physical speed, but it's the mental processing speed and the anticipation. The only guys that that I think could be capable of playing a role like that, Wanye Thomas, who's apparently got migraine headaches so bad they had to put him on IR. Hopefully he finds some sort of a solution for that. And then Marquise Bell, who also, played some linebacker under Dan Quinn, but has been a safety since Quinn headed off for Washington. Okay, up next here on How About Wow, Dawson and New Bear. Let's go ahead and do this. We are approaching the debut of Cowboys rookie Shavon Revel. We have Dad actually came in pretty hot. He went on the All City Dallas podcast with Jeff and Jesse and Clarence Hill. Predicted an interception for his son, Shavon Revel Jr., in his debut if they try him 2 or more times. I imagine that the Raiders are going to be looking at going after the rookie. A guy who would have been a second-round pick for sure, maybe even a late first had he not torn his ACL in his final year of college. I don't know what to expect, but I guess there's probably a 10 or 15% chance that he is one of those rookies that you're like, holy crap, this guy is good to go immediately. But I imagine it's going to be part of the frustration. So what would generally be your expectations for a second or late first round rookie coming off a torn ACL? It's like, it's not a picture of a guy coming in to save the day.
Well, remember when we were out in Oxnard and we saw him doing drills? I was like, dude, no chance. Like, he is nowhere near ready. The number one thing that I'm going to be watching is in and out of breaks, and does he trust his body because it was clear that Diggs still didn't at the start of the season. And I'm not saying he slipped in Chicago because the field is great. And I'm not saying, some of the other decisions that he's made, weren't decisions that guys like Deion Sanders made for years and decades, right? But at the same time, when you're making decisions because your body isn't right, you don't just look like a shell of your former self. You cost your team, down in and down out. And when they can't trust you to do your job, that's where you see guys trying to make up for other guys. And it's so far beyond communication because you're not on a string and it could be 3-by-2 and both dudes are running open, meaning 3 defenders, safety help over the top or trying to box in one and I know that's a basketball term, but it's something that I like to think about, relative to how different teams try to manipulate you. And if they can do a little bit of pre-snap motion and get you completely off kilter or dictate based on matchups, right, where they've got their wide receiver 1 on Donovan Wilson in goal line situations where he doesn't have a chance before the snap. Like Revel has all the traits, all the makings to be one of those guys who takes away one of your guys. It starts, though, with him trusting himself.
Okay, how much do you trust the Green Bay Packers to be a playoff team? We have not done a show since the Sunday show. It's been a slower week with news, with everything going on and coming out of the bye. I brought up on that Sunday show, I thought the Packers could miss the playoffs, and we talked about how their playoff odds would drop to about 65% if they lost to Philadelphia. And I said, man, the book is out. The Steelers showed everybody what not to do against Green Bay, and then they lost Tucker Kraft. So I think their schedule is just littered with good defenses that could keep them under 20 points. They only scored 7 against the Eagles. Micah Parsons said afterwards, we're going to be fine. Nobody is panicking. But if you read the Packers blogs today and Packers Twitter, they're talking about maybe we need to get rid of Matt LaFleur, which is hilarious because he's one of the top offensive minds in football. They have no weapons other than Josh Jacobs and I guess Christian Watson is back and some younger guys. But, Reed got hurt early in the season and now Kraft is out. I think this is legitimate. I would eyeball their playoff chances at much closer to 50-50. I think this is a sinking ship up there in Green Bay. And you got to love this as a Cowboys fan. Like, what if the Cowboys really only win 5 games and have a top 10 pick and Green Bay somehow misses the playoffs? That pick 17-18, that's usually the end of the line of demarcation for where the true first round graded players go. There's rarely 20 to 30 first round graded players. I don't know if it's ever happened in a draft. So a top 20 pick's a real first rounder. Picks in the 20s into the early 30s are already second rounders, I think, when you look at it that way.
So isn't it crazy how on both sides of the docket, both AFC and NFC North, you go from having these preseason prognostications of 2, if not 3 teams from that division getting in on both sides, and now you might have to win the North to get in and have a wild card. Like, it's crazy how this season, I mean, obviously the NFL is designed for that, and that's why everyone watches, because it's a soap opera and you never know. But like, damn, going into this season, if you would have told me, I mean, obviously Burrow got hurt and obviously Lamar has been out and there's, reasons that the AFC side has fallen. But on the NFC side, Love, Williams, Goff, they're all out there dealing and they all have 3 losses and the Packers have 3.5 courtesy of the Dallas Cowboys. So yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? Because all these teams play each other. And so they're only going to have more losses, but then they also, like when you think about the LaFleur thing, like you just talked about it without them having any weapons. You remember when the NFL like mic'd up was a big deal because it happened like for one game, and now everything is there's a mic on there's mics in shoulder pads, there's mics on the refs, you hear everything. So it's not just Monday night or Sunday night football where game of the week where you hear the defense calling, oh look, it's inside zone, it's trapped. Like, and everyone scouts, so the data is so much better than it's ever been. And guys, not everybody's Luke Kuechly who actually is calling the play, and it's the play. Ray Lewis calling the play, and it's the play. Some of these guys are just saying shit to part of the pre-snap defensive cadence to try to get in the quarterback's head, get them to change so they could change, because it's all a dance, right?
Cat and mouse, yeah.
So when you see that, and you see them get stuffed, because they did not look good. And the Eagles, we've talked about how this isn't last year's Super Bowl defense, and then they go out and put on a performance like that. Jalen Hurts has to literally make one play to win the game. Saquon Barkley makes one play to win the game. And all of a sudden LaFleur's not just on the hot seat, but like, get this man out of town when, 5 minutes ago he was a genius. And it's wild to see. And Jordan Love's the same way, right? Where we talk about him, the Carolina game, that tape blew my mind with some of the 500 balls that he was throwing. So this is going to be an interesting stretch run for them because of attrition. Best team, healthiest team. Oftentimes the team that wins the Super Bowl isn't the actual best team, but that's where the whole best ability is availability stuff comes from.
All right, it's Dawson and Newbear here on How About Wow. Please like the video if you like the content. Speaking of Micah, brother, got more details on that poison pill they put in the contract where if the Packers trade him inside the NFC East, another first-round pick would come to the Cowboys. The deal is the Cowboys were worried that the Packers were going to immediately flip him to Philadelphia. That interesting? Because I guess the Eagles were offering 3-1s.
Right.
The Cowboys were like, no, we're not giving him to Philadelphia. Green Bay's had the next best offer. So like, okay, we're sending him to you, but we're worried that you'll immediately send him to Philadelphia. I appreciate the Cowboys' foresight on this.
Do you really think Jerry Jones turned down 3-1s from the Eagles? Do you think that's real, or do you think that's bullshit?
I would have thought it was BS until this report.
Okay. Well, having said that, it would have been pretty hilarious for Green Bay to immediately do that had they given up, Van Ness or one of the other pieces that we talked about, into the run-up of that trade. I just, man, the Howie Roseman effect is really something, isn't it? Like, he made multiple trades for backup cornerback just to make sure that no matter what happened, they were covered. And when you look at he's second, right? Who's the only GM that's made more trades than him? It's not Howie Roseman. There's one other guy. Who's the other guy?
Maybe Belichick with New England. I mean, he was trading his balls off
all the time.
Rams.
I'm going to look this up. I think it is Les Snead. But as as you go through this and you go, Rams did more than less with Howie Roseman. I'll come back to this. I'll throw it up when we post. And it's one of those things where I saw it and I was like, damn, who the hell's making more deals than Howie Roseman? And I think the thing that's so special, I think the reason Howie Roseman gets so much publicity for it is because the moves that he's made has shaped Super Bowls, but has also shown that even when you win the Super Bowl, you don't stop making moves. And I think that's the reason why I live in Pittsburgh and everyone's so pissed at Tomlin, Khan, and the Rooneys is because they have holes. They didn't address them. In Cowboys Nation has to, at the very least, whether you love what they've gotten in return for Micah, you think they should have gotten more, or you think there's still more to do and it's TBD, you have to, going all the way back to George Pickens in the summer, you have to at least appreciate the fact that Jerry Jones went on the red carpet and said, I was lazy, I got complacent, I have my rings, I was more interested in oil and making movies than building another Super Bowl team. And now he's interested in that again. And he's making moves and he's doing things not just for engagement farming to make the star interesting and to sell everything from, Pepsi to tweets, but to actually go chase another Lombardi.
And we're late. We got just a couple of minutes left in the show. But as a final note on that, one of the stories of the NFL today was an insider says the Cowboys are most likely going to franchise tag George Pickens instead of giving him a long-term deal. I would say, Jerry Jones, if you're really feeling your age at 83 and you want to get out of that complacency and not being enough of a gambler, really what you need to do is get everything done to make sure you can do a long-term deal with George Pickens, not let it sacrifice your defense. You got to build the defense as well this upcoming offseason. But if you do want to franchise tag George Pickens, you can't go back and do another offseason and a summer and a training camp of a holdout and all the drama and all the toxicity charged back into this. If you want to franchise tag George Pickens, you need to make damn sure he's going to be happy playing for $28 million guaranteed for one season, which is possible, happens every now and then. Maybe he loves being a Cowboy and being partners with CD. But if you can't get any of those two things done, you need to tag and trade him immediately so they can have a clean off season and have all those resources to to make sure they can build out both sides of the ball. And there's plenty of other things you could do at wide receiver too. You don't need 2 ones. You just need a real legitimate 2, which you could get for about $20 million.
So the one thing that I will agree on you with that straight away is if they lose to the Raiders and they end up in a position where at the end of the season they're playing Joe Milton. The caveat to that is if the franchise tag is in upwards of $30 million, if it's $28 million, that is like 5, 8. That is like 3.5. Isn't that like 3.5 times the total money Pickens has made through 4 years, right? He wasn't a 1.
Yeah.
So there was no 5th-year option. He fell to the second round because of the ACL. So he made like 3, I want to say he's made like 8 or 9. Yeah, that's 3.5 times what he's made to date. And next year will be his age 25 season. So I have to believe that there's room in there to have the conversation about doing a year of the tag. And then in the year 2, it goes up another 20%, right? So now you're talking CeeDee Lamb money and their par for the course running with each other. And he's still only 26 and he can still get paid. So it's like, if anybody's ever going to bet on himself and be crazy enough to be like the year-to-year guy who's just out there doing whatever, it might be GP.
Yeah, I mean, he was very casual and laissez-faire about the money. He says the money's going to come. I'm going to be a good player for a long time, so I can get paid anywhere. And if you have confidence in yourself, he doesn't get hurt. Like doing a $28 million 1 year fully guaranteed, and then after the cap goes up another 10%, then negotiating your long-term deal and getting the $100+ million guaranteed, the entire career's worth of earnings would be higher if you could make it through the tag year, produce another 1,300 yards with 10 touchdowns. Like the money would absolutely be raining out of the sky. But to my point, if you want to do a long-term deal with Pickens, I think the best thing would be a very long-term deal, backloaded, keep the cap number super low year 1, and really push all in with that checkbook to make sure both sides can be top 10 at least. And one of the units got to be top 5 to win the Super Bowl. I truly believe that. We're back soon, maybe tomorrow, with more content as the Cowboys will be back at practice getting ready for the Raiders. We expect a big batch of storylines to be matriculating through the news cycle tomorrow. For New Bear, I'm Dawson. Till next time, how about wow?